There's a sequence in economic history that has obliterated three major economies in the last 100 years. Not damaged them, obliterated them. And right now in 2025, the world's largest economies are replicating that sequence with mathematical precision, like they're following a blueprint designed for catastrophe. 1923, Germany. A wheelbarrow full of cash couldn't buy a loaf of bread. Life savings vanished in days. The middle class ceased to exist. 2008, Zimbabwe. They printed a $100 trillion bill. It couldn't buy you lunch. Prices doubled every 24 hours. 2018, Venezuela. A country drowning in oil became a country where people ate zoo animals to survive. The currency lost 99.9% of its value in 5 years. Three nations. Three total currency collapses. One identical pattern. And since 2020, central banks worldwide have printed more money than all three of those countries combined before they imploded. We're not approaching the pattern. We're deep inside it. Before we trace the pattern through history, you need to understand what hyperinflation means in reality. Not in textbooks, but on the street when money actually dies. The official definition: inflation exceeding 50% per month, prices doubling every 30 days. But when hyperinflation truly takes hold, it accelerates beyond comprehension. Prices double every day, then every hour. Picture this. Monday morning, you receive your salary. By Monday evening, it's lost a third of its purchasing power. The grocery store has already adjusted prices upward twice. Gas stations update their signs hourly. You sprint to buy anything tangible before your cash becomes confetti. But so is everyone else. Shelves empty within hours. The money in your wallet isn't money anymore. It's a ticking time bomb. Tomorrow it buys half as much. Next week, a quarter. By next month, nothing. Your life savings? Gone. Doesn't matter if you saved for 3 decades, it evaporates in weeks. Pensions become worthless. Insurance policies pay out in currency that can't buy a meal. Government bonds become kindling. Everyone who trusted the system, who saved in the national currency, who followed the rules, who believed their government, loses everything. This isn't theory. This is documented reality from Germany, Zimbabwe, and Venezuela. And it happened because their governments made the exact decisions we're making right now. They printed money to solve problems that printing money cannot solve. And they swore, right up until the collapse, that their situation was different, that it couldn't happen to them. Let's examine how it actually unfolded, 3 times, the exact same way. Case study 1. Weimar Germany, 1923, the blueprint. This is the original template. Every hyperinflation since has followed this script with haunting accuracy. After World War I, Germany faced an impossible situation. The Treaty of Versailles demanded 132 billion gold marks in reparations. That's approximately 50,000 tons of gold, about $1.4 trillion in today's currency. Germany didn't have it. The war had devastated the economy. Production collapsed, unemployment soared, tax revenues dried up. The government faced a choice: default on payments and face military occupation. Print the money to make the payments. They chose to print. And this is where every hyperinflation begins, with a government that cannot or will not live within its means. Phase 1, the slow burn, 1919 to 1921. At first, it seemed manageable. The Reichsbank began expanding the money supply in 1919. Prices rose, but not catastrophically. The government told citizens it was temporary, necessary for rebuilding. Trust the process. By 1921, the exchange rate hit 60 marks to the dollar. Not good, but survivable. Phase 2, the acceleration, 1922. Then, France occupied the Ruhr, Germany's industrial heartland, demanding reparations by force. Workers went on strike. Production stopped completely. But the government kept paying the striking workers. With printed money. More and more and more. This is the point of no return. By year's end, 1922, the rate was 7,400 marks to the dollar. Inflation was noticeable, but people still believed the government had control. They didn't. The printing had already crossed from monetary policy into monetary suicide. Phase 3, the death spiral, 1923. January 1923, 17,000 marks to the dollar. July, 350,000 marks to the dollar. August, 4.6 million marks to the dollar. October, 25 billion marks to the dollar. November, 4.2 trillion marks to the dollar. Let's make this tangible. A loaf of bread cost 250 marks in January 1923. By November, that same loaf cost 200 billion marks. A single egg, 80 billion marks. A kilo of butter, 6 trillion marks. Workers were paid twice daily. They'd rush to stores during lunch breaks to spend their morning wages before afternoon inflation destroyed the value. Restaurants changed menu prices while customers ate. People carried cash in wheelbarrows because it was too worthless to count. They burned money in fireplaces. It was cheaper than buying firewood. The middle class was annihilated. Anyone with savings in marks lost everything. Anyone on fixed income, pensions, salaries, bonds, was wiped out overnight. Society fractured, crime exploded, political extremism surged, and from that chaos emerged the Nazis. Hyperinflation didn't just destroy the currency. It destroyed the social contract. It destroyed faith in government, in markets, in the future itself. Germany swore it would never happen again. But 85 years later, another nation followed the identical script. Case Study 2, Zimbabwe. 2008, history repeats. Zimbabwe in 2000 had everything. Good infrastructure, educated population, massive agricultural exports. They were called the breadbasket of Africa. Then Robert Mugabe's government made decisions that would destroy the economy in under a decade. The trigger, 2000 to 2003. In 2000, the government began seizing white-owned commercial farms and redistributing them. Agricultural production collapsed. Food exports stopped. The economy began contracting. Tax revenue dropped. And the government faced the same choice Germany faced in 1919. Live within their means or print money to cover the shortfall. They printed. By 2003, inflation hit 600%. Bad, but not catastrophic yet. The government claimed it was temporary, blamed sanctions, blamed external enemies, never blamed the printing. The acceleration, 2006 to 2007. By 2006, inflation reached 1,200%. The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe kept printing, funding government salaries, funding the military, funding projects they couldn't afford. Then came the acceleration phase. 2007, inflation hit 100,000%. Store shelves emptied. Factories closed. People fled the country. The government's response? Print even more money and implement price controls. This always makes it worse. Producers stopped producing because selling at controlled prices meant guaranteed losses. Supply vanished. Black market prices exploded. The death spiral, 2008. 2008 is when Zimbabwe entered the history books. January, 100,000% inflation. April, 150,000% inflation. June, 11 million% inflation. July. Official statistics stopped because the government couldn't calculate it anymore. Independent economists measured the peak at 89.7 sextillion% annually. Let me translate that number. At that inflation rate, prices doubled every 24.7 hours. A Coke that cost $1 Zimbabwe dollar on Monday morning cost $2 Tuesday morning, $4 Wednesday, $8 Thursday. By the following Monday, $128. In 1 week, the Reserve Bank printed a $100 trillion note. That's not hyperbole. 100 trillion on a single piece of paper. It couldn't buy you 3 eggs. People stopped using money entirely. They bartered. Used US dollars. used South African rand, anything except Zimbabwe dollars. The country's GDP shrank 50%. Unemployment hit 94%. The average person lost 24 pounds from starvation. Life expectancy dropped from 60 years to 34 years in 1 decade. Cholera outbreaks, infrastructure collapse, total economic and social breakdown. In 2009, Zimbabwe officially abandoned its currency. They'd printed it into worthlessness. Everyone who held savings in Zimbabwe dollars lost everything. Decades of work, gone. And once again, the world said, it could never happen to us. Zimbabwe was different. Bad governance, corruption, unique circumstances. It wasn't unique. It was the same pattern, the same choices, the same math. And 10 years later, another country proved it. Case study. 3. Venezuela. 2018, the modern collapse. Venezuela in 2001 was the wealthiest country in South America. They had the largest proven oil reserves on Earth, more than Saudi Arabia. GDP per capita higher than Brazil. Universal health care, free education, a functioning democracy. Then Hugo Chavez, and later Nicolas Maduro, made the same choices every hyperinflation government makes. The setup, 2012 to 2016. Massive expansion of social programs without revenue to fund them. Nationalization of industries. Price controls. And when tax revenue couldn't cover spending, they printed money. From 2012 to 2017, Venezuela's money supply increased by 14,000%. Not 14%. 14,000%. The Central Bank of Venezuela ran the printing presses 24/7, funding government spending, covering deficits, paying for programs they couldn't afford. By 2016, inflation hit 800%. Store shelves emptied. The government blamed hoarders, speculators, and economic warfare. They implemented price controls, forcing businesses to sell below cost. Predictably, businesses stopped producing. Supply disappeared entirely. The acceleration, 2017 to 2018. 2017, inflation hit 2,600%. People began eating from trash cans. Zoos reported animals disappearing, later found butchered for meat. Hospitals ran out of basic supplies. The power grid failed regularly. The bolivar was dying, but the government kept printing. 2018, inflation hit 1.3 million%, then 2.6 million. Estimates reached 10 million% by year's end. At that rate, a carton of eggs that cost 200 bolivars in January cost 200 million bolivars by December. The government printed a 1 million bolivar note. Within months, it couldn't buy a cup of coffee. They removed 5 zeros from the currency in 2018, calling it the sovereign bolivar. It failed immediately. They removed 6 more zeros in 2021, another redenomination. That failed too. The aftermath. By 2019, over 5 million Venezuelans had fled. 7% of the population became refugees. Those who stayed lost an average of 24 pounds from malnutrition. Doctors, teachers, engineers abandoned their professions. Some became prostitutes because it paid more. Others fled. GDP collapsed by 75%. That's worse than the Great Depression. Venezuela's economy shrank more than Germany's after World War II. Oil production, the country's lifeblood, dropped 70% because the government couldn't maintain infrastructure. Today, Venezuela has essentially dollarized. Most transactions happen in US dollars, not bolivars. The currency they printed into oblivion is worthless. And everyone who trusted the government, who kept savings in bolivars, who believed it would stabilize, lost everything. The pattern: 4 stages of currency death, 3 countries, 3 complete currency collapses. Different continents, different decades, different political systems. But the exact same pattern, the exact same choices, the exact same math. Let's break it down, because once you see it, you'll understand why what's happening now should terrify you. Stage 1. The trigger. Every hyperinflation begins with a crisis. Germany, war reparations. Zimbabwe, agricultural collapse. Venezuela, falling oil prices and socialist overspending. The crisis creates a budget shortfall. Tax revenue drops. Spending commitments remain or increase. Stage 2. The choice. The government faces a decision. Cut spending, politically impossible. Raise taxes, doesn't generate enough revenue fast enough. Default on obligations means loss of power. Print money to cover the gap. They always print. Stage 3. The justification. The government claims it's temporary, a bridge to better times. Modern monetary theory says this works. We're different. We have resources. We'll grow out of it. The experts agree. Trust the process. Stage 4. The acceleration. At first, the printing seems manageable. Then, it crosses an invisible line, the point of no return. Inflation appears. The government blames external forces. They print more to combat the inflation they created by printing. The spiral begins. And once it starts, no government in history has successfully stopped it without a complete currency collapse. Where we are now, the global money printing experiment. In March 2020, the world faced a crisis, COVID-19. Lockdowns, economic shutdown. Governments worldwide face the same choice every hyperinflation government has faced. Accept the economic pain and let markets adjust, or print money to paper over the damage. They printed trillions upon trillions. The numbers: the U.S. Federal Reserve's balance sheet, $4 trillion, February 2020, $9 trillion, April 2022. The U.S. government spent $5 trillion in COVID relief. Money created from nothing, deposited directly into accounts. The European Central Bank expanded its balance sheet by over 4 trillion euros. The Bank of Japan continued decades of money printing, now holding assets worth 130% of Japan's entire GDP. China injected trillions of yuan into its system. Every major central bank. Same response. Print money, worry about consequences later. And just like Weimar, Zimbabwe, and Venezuela, the government said it was temporary, necessary to save the economy. We'll unwind it later. Modern monetary theory says we can handle this. Inflation is transitory. Trust the experts. The results. For a while, it seemed fine. 2020 to 2021. Printed money propped up markets. Stock prices soared. Real estate exploded. Crypto went vertical. Everyone with assets got richer. But by late 2021, inflation appeared. By 2022, it was undeniable. The U.S. hit 9.1% official inflation in June 2022, highest in 40 years. Europe hit double digits. The UK saw inflation rates not seen since the 1980s. Food, energy, housing, everything surged. The response: exactly what every hyperinflation government does. Blame external forces. Putin's war, supply chain issues, corporate greed. Never the money printing, never the trillions created from nothing. And while they've raised interest rates to fight inflation, they haven't stopped the printing. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet is still over $7 trillion, double what it was before COVID. Government spending hasn't stopped. U.S. deficit in 2024, $1.8 trillion. During an economic expansion, the printing continues. We're in stage 4, the acceleration phase. The warning signs, checking the boxes. Let's review the warning signs that appeared before every hyperinflation collapse. See how many apply today. 1. Massive money supply expansion check. USM2 money supply increased 40% from 2020 to 2022. Unprecedented peacetime expansion. 2. Government deficits. Out of control check. U.S. ran $1.8 trillion deficit in 2024, over 6% of GDP, during a recovery. Japan's debt is 264% of GDP. This doesn't happen in healthy systems. 3. Rising inflation. Despite government claims, it's under control, check. Official CPI says 3 to 4%. Real inflation, the prices you actually pay for food, housing, insurance, is far higher. Shrinkflation, substitution, hedonistic adjustments. The official numbers hide reality. 4. Asset price inflation. Disconnected from economic fundamentals, check. Stock markets at all-time highs, while real wages fall. Real estate unaffordable for entire generations. Wealth inequality at levels not seen since the 1920s. 5. Loss of faith in currency. Emerging, check. Bitcoin exists because people don't trust central banks. Gold hitting record prices. BRICS nations developing alternative payment systems. Foreign central banks reducing dollar holdings. The cracks are showing. 6. Political justification for continued spending, check. Every crisis justifies more spending, more printing. Climate change, infrastructure, defense, social programs. There's always a reason. There's never a plan to stop. Germany thought they'd stop after paying reparations. Zimbabwe thought they'd stop after land reform stabilized. Venezuela thought they'd stop once oil prices recovered. None of them stopped. Because once you start, stopping means accepting the consequences of what you've done. And no government willingly chooses collapse. What happens next? The pattern is here. We're following it. The only questions are, how fast will it accelerate? And how bad will the ending be? 3 times in the last century, major economies followed this exact pattern. Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, Venezuela. Each time they thought they were different. Each time the math won. You cannot print prosperity, you cannot create wealth from nothing, and you cannot avoid the consequences of monetary expansion forever. The bill always comes due. The only question is when. Since 2020, the world's major economies have printed more money than all 3 hyperinflation examples combined. The Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, the People's Bank of China. All running the same playbook that failed catastrophically 3 times before. We're told it's different this time. We have better tools, better economists, better understanding. We can manage this. That's what they said in Weimar, in Zimbabwe, in Venezuela, right up until the collapse. History doesn't repeat itself perfectly, but it rhymes. And right now, the rhyme is deafening. We're in stage 4 of the pattern, the acceleration phase, the point where every previous example lost control, where printing begat more printing, where inflation became exponential, where the currency began its death spiral. Maybe we'll find a way out. Maybe modern central banks can thread a needle that's never been threaded before. Maybe we'll gently unwind $20 trillion in printed money without consequences. Maybe this time really is different. But the pattern says otherwise. The math says otherwise. And history, which has watched this play out 3 times already, says we're about to learn the same lesson again. The hard way. Closing. 3 nations follow the pattern. 3 nations collapsed. The 4th cycle is underway. The printing presses are running. The justifications are identical. The math is immutable. If this opened your eyes to what's coming, subscribe to the Wealth Forum. Because when the pattern completes, you'll want to understand what happened and why. History has the answers. And history is screaming a warning right now. The only question is, are you listening?